Hey everybody, Bentley Compost Guy, Christy here again. I know it's been a bit of a video production week. This is actually the third video that I've been creating this week on a bit of a tear and hoping to keep up some momentum with these videos. In this one, I want to tell you more about these mystery worms that I mentioned in my bucket system update. Again, these are small composting worms that have been doing really well in the bucket systems that have been down in my basement. And I decided to isolate them into their own system to see kind of what happens and see how much potential they have for breeding and composting and these sorts of things. So what you see in front of you are what I referred to as tiny tub systems in my last video. Another name I sometimes give to them are microculture bins. And these are small systems that are great for experimentation. They have some potential for vermiculture if you want to create little cultures of composting worms and cocoons and whatnot, and potentially sell them if you want. They're really fun little systems. I will probably make another video kind of more dedicated to that topic in particular. But yeah, just so you know what I was talking about last time when I mentioned tiny tubs. You can see on the top, not the most attractive looking bins in the world, but I have a sort of breathable aeration system on these. These Cool Whip containers are a bit too thin for those bottle cap vents that I have in my buckets, so I had to just kind of rig something up a bit more low tech, and it's all it is just there's holes underneath there in the lid, and then I secured a piece of old bed sheet over top just to kind of help keep things contained, to help gnats, to help prevent gnats and other things from getting in, and then if they do become established, help to stop them from getting out. So what I want to show you today is I want to kind of compare. This is my 10 worm experiment, started January 6th. This is with red worms. So this is a separate little trial that I've been doing. And then these are two of my three new worm systems. And you can see I have dendro written on there. I'm not 100% sure what kind of worms they are, but my hunch is some sort of small dendrobina or dendrodrillis. So dendro kind of works for either one of those. I'm not really sure what kind of worm I have. But anyway, these were started much more recently. Earlier in the week, really. It's been about 6 days. It's 28th today. So these are newer systems, and we're going to see how things look. One thing to mention, you see this one says warm, and this one says cool. I have two of them down in my basement, and just out of curiosity, I thought I would put one of these in a closet upstairs where the temperatures are definitely warmer. I'm just kind of curious to see if there's any differences. More cocoons dropped, or it could be a negative thing. These could be worms that are really well adapted for cool temperatures, and maybe that's why they're doing so well down in the basement in comparison to the red worms. All right, so first we'll just kind of dump out this red worm one. You can see just sort of a variety of things. What I like with these little tiny tub types of systems is to create a mix that is sort of like a living habitat food mix that I don't need to mess around with. It basically has everything the worms need, and then I just leave it for a set period of time. And you can see right there, that is a sort of typical red worm. And you know what, it might not be a bad idea to dump out one of these, because I do want to kind of make a comparison in terms of size. Okay, so you can see, I mean, this is not very far in, but this one has 20 worms, I should mention. Each of these new ones has 20 worms, and you can see that they've been working away already. Like that, it's sort of a bit of a solidified mass in a sense, and you can just sort of see these little marks of worm activity. So that's kind of cool. What I added, I had a sort of habitat mix, and I actually added some additional poultry feed, dry feed, very small amount. You got to be careful with it. I usually use it as more of a supplement than a actual food in my systems. But you can see here these little white mites. That was probably one of the little dry feed things. White mites aren't a real issue. They tend to, if you get a lot of them, it tends to indicate that maybe a bit of overfeeding, things like that. I mean, you shouldn't have a ton of them, but the mites themselves are not an issue. They are basically just a scavenger, and they're not something to fear or, be revolted by. It should be more of an indication that maybe you're kind of overfeeding or something along those lines. So you can see every worm in this one is going to be a mature worm, and you can see the size of that compared to my finger. I mean, that looks like a kind of juvenile redworm, but you can see the clitellum right there, right there. So see a little bit further back than in the redworms, and yeah, like I said, they're all kind of mature worms. So let's go back to this one again. Oh, cool. That's interesting to see. That's a juvenile worm. Happy to see that. There's a cocoon, but the big, well, not big, these are not big redworms, but if you kind of look at the size comparison, so that's a pretty good indicator right there that these new worms are a fair bit smaller. In terms of coloration, they're quite pale in comparison to the redworms, which is sort of a nice dark reddish color. The clitellum has a really interesting sort of creamy yellow color to it. That's another thing. And one thing I mentioned in the other video, oftentimes when I find these guys, they almost seem to have this sort of frozen look about them. They're not really moving, and they have this curved body appearance. These ones in these little bins seem to be getting fairly active, so anytime I check on them, they seem to be moving around a fair bit. But yeah, definitely fairly easy to recognize or to distinguish from the redworms in my experience. And what I'm looking for right now is I'm trying to kind of check on the cocoon situation. I have looked at these little systems a number of times, and I started finding cocoons. Literally, I checked the next day just to make sure that it's never a bad idea with small systems like this, just to make sure that nothing is going to go wrong. In a tiny little system, if there's anything off, that's one of the kind of challenges of working with these little systems. If anything's off, it can really wreak havoc in a hurry. As compared to a larger system where there's more room for the worms to kind of escape and spread out in. There are definitely cocoons. It's just a question of whether or not I can actually find one. Of course, when I'm shooting the video, I can never seem to find any. Now, I'm actually, oh, there we go. I was going to put the phone down and see if I could find one for you. See how round and yellow and small that is? And I know I had a redworm one over here. See if I can round one up in a hurry. But what's interesting, I mean, this redworm little bin was started January 11th. really it should have a lot more cocoons in it than it does. And this isn't the best example. You see it's sort of more of a lemon shape. It's definitely bigger. And yeah, so it's different than this little round yellow one. Now, one thing that I do want to see is this yellow color could indicate that it is a pretty new cocoon, but all of the ones that I've found, even in systems where they've been hanging out for a while, seem to retain that bright color. So it's an easy way to tell them apart, and of course size and shape. So yeah, it's really interesting to have these worms separated now, and I am eager to see what happens over time. Again, I want to see if they have any kind of reproductive and composting potential that compares to red worms. You know, maybe they drop cocoons quickly, but who knows? It could take a couple months for them to hatch or something like that. So I really want to see just how fast the population grows. Maybe I'll just quickly dump out this warm one. I don't want these to get too intermingled, obviously. They are distinct systems, but just kind of curious. I don't think there's going to be any significant difference at this time. It does look a bit wetter, but all in all, there's still active worms in there. Doesn't seem to be any major problems being caused by these somewhat warmer temperatures. In terms of cocoons, oh, there's one right off the bat. I can't say for sure that there are more cocoons or less cocoons. I haven't really done any kind of serious assessment, but time will tell. I mean, this is one thing I do want to see. Oh, there's another one. So, I mean, this seems to potentially indicate that they may drop cocoons faster in the warmer system. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's actually a third one. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see over time what effect, if any, a number of degrees Celsius makes in terms of the speed of reproduction and everything else. All right. I don't know if that's a new one or not, but there's another cocoon. So yeah, I've been having an easier time in this warm one. Might just be luck, but it almost seems like there are more cocoons in it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't want to drag this out too long, but should be very interesting. Again, I do plan to create a video that's sort of dedicated to the topic of these microculture bins, or these tiny tub systems, just to explain the kind of rationale and the backstory and everything. But yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, this is Bentley Compost Guy Christie, and I hope to talk to you again soon.